I was just here about a month or so ago. My executive director and I, his name is Willard Bass, and I'm here today on his behalf, actually. We were at UNC Pembroke for a first-time summit similar to this, and I was just so happy to see so many people of color on the streets, the Lumbee Indians. And I learned a lot that day. Mostly what I learned, I was very disappointed about the racial divide, you know, and how the dominant culture historically pitted the Native Americans against African Americans, and to this day it still is pervasive. So that was very disheartening for me. Just to tell you a little bit about me and why I come to do what I do. I have a story too about a situation that happened to me when I was little that stayed with me around race. Actually, I have lots of them, but actually I have lots of them. Yes. But the one that stays with me is when I was pulled aside when I was about 6 years old, going to a predominantly white school. Actually, I was the first African American who was able to go to that school. Right, I was at 50. This was 1957, I think it was, and just when schools were integrated, and I was the only African American child in this white school in my little town in West Virginia. And I had a friend. Her name was Margaret Regina McCrae. I had never forgotten it because she was my best friend. And we were just pulled aside one day. Well, actually, I was pushed aside by the principal, and she was told to come inside. And when she came back out, because I waited for her, of course, you know, and when she came back out, she came out with her head down, and I said, "What's wrong, Margaret?" She said, "I can't play with you anymore." And that was like my first time, wow, getting some blatant knockdown. I didn't even understand that it was about race, but I guess some part of me maybe did. But I've never forgotten that. And you know, when I went on and was relocated to a northern city in Newark, New Jersey, I got the reverse kind of stuff going on. You know, that internalized racial oppression was creeping in with my relationships with other African Americans. So then it was around region and where you came from, and you were Southern and you were Northern. So didn't quite understand it, but you know, it's always been a struggle. Then going on to college, going to Boston University and being the only African American in my curriculum, and racism in 1970 at its height in Roxbury. Going there and Black Panthers on the streets pulling us aside, telling we didn't need to be there, we need to be making babies for the revolution. Ooh, and going to Roxbury and going to totalitarian centers and learning how the dominant culture was going to be ridding of us and planning to take us out to distant places that they've kept, you know, from World War I, concentration camps that, woo. So all of that was going on for me. And then moving on, because I left Boston University after a semester, I was pretty depressed. But moving on in the corporate arena, worked on Wall Street after I got out of college. Wow, racism. It hit me hard. You know, it hit me hard. Hit me so hard that I had to leave the first job I had. You know, the racism was so deep. I never got to show my stuff, never got to do what I needed to do to show that I was just as competent as the others. And I was a rebel riser too, but this was 1975, so it was a little more dangerous. And you know, it kind of derailed my career at times. Well, now I'm in Winston-Salem for 20 years, and I've always said that the most racially oppressive workplace that I've ever worked at was R.J. Reynolds in Winston-Salem. Worked there as a professional, and there's a whole lot of stories I can tell you about that too. But when we talk about that internalized racial superiority and internalized racial oppression, it plays out in the corporate sector so much. And that has brought me to really be very passionate about the institutional piece of racism, how it divides us all and pits us all against one another, and how the social construct is maintained in institutions. The Institute for Dismantling Racism is the organization that I represent, and it's been in operation since 2003. It started out as a result of the executive director, Willard Bass, attending Wake Forest University in divinity school, getting his divinity degree. And while he was at Wake Forest, he realized that there was so much division. Even there, becoming ministers, everyone's supposed to be unified around God. But they even have a course there called Radical Jesus, because you're looking at all the different sides of how people see Jesus in their life, and how some people see him as inclusive, and as some people see him as exclusive. Same thing with institutions. Well, he decided, since one of his professors kept on asking him to come to this Radical Jesus course, and he would say, Willard, I want you to come over and come to the course and, tell us good white folks what we're doing wrong and how we're perpetuating this thing you call racism. Didn't use those same words, but basically that's what he wanted him to do, is come teach. Tell us your story, tell us your pain. So he told me, how many times I got to do this for y'all? And that kind of started this impetus towards creating a mechanism where people can come from institutions and form coalitions to sit down and really look at racism and how it started, the origin of it, historically, in Europe, and the whole thing around, holding of power for political, for monetary gain. And we started out with just a core group of people. Started out at a church, which we're still at the Green Street Church, which is a United Methodist Church. That's where we're housed. Started out in 2003, and we hold these trainings. Our trainings are 2.5-day trainings of anti-racism trainings that are conducted by Crossroads out of Chicago. What we do is we start out with a historical perspective. We actually put a blank wall of history on the walls. And after a short introduction to what we were doing, why we're there, what we're going to do in the 2.5 days, everyone is invited to get up and to fill the wall. The top piece of the wall, there's a line. The top piece of the wall is racism, the manifestations of racism, historically speaking, going forward from the 1800s until now. And then the bottom piece is resistance to it. And that's how we start out, getting it in the room. What has the dominant culture done to validate racism in this country? And what have people of color done to fight and resist against it? And if I can right now, this is a really good snapshot of what institutional racism does and how it's manifested. Okay, so we got the breakdown of the different racial groups. So these are everybody in America, except white Americans. The racial economic strategy, of course, the dehumanization of all of these subgroups. So this explains this, and historically, the strategy behind it. And most importantly, the examples of the legally mandated racism and apartheid with all these different subgroups. See, all these different laws have mandated racism all through history. And you can look at the chattel slavery, one-drop rule, this is for African Americans, Dred Scott decision, slave codes, Plessy versus Ferguson, Jim Crow laws. These are legally mandated racism and apartheid laws. And as you go down, you'll see that they exist for every single person, all the largest groups of color of people in America. An example of changing these laws, you'll see how the resistance, this goes along with the history that's on our walls when we do our training, the history of resistance to racism. And to the right of that is examples of self-perpetuating racism. A lot of that has to do with the internalized oppression that we talk about. But it all ends up in maintaining the construct of race, dividing groups by race, which is, as we know, as I've said, and this lady here has said, that it is a social construct that was constructed just to divide people and just to keep the 1% on top, just by race. If we, if we're all the same color, what else would it be? Maybe it would be eye color. Someone may recall the woman, I forget her name. She did a experiment with her children when Martin Luther King was assassinated in the 60s, with her children in school, 4th graders, and she wanted them to understand, why did they kill Martin Luther King? Because she was just teaching that in class, how great a man he was, and they killed him. And so to make the kids understand, she just changed the eye color. She said, hierarchy, blue-colored kids are going to be, they're smarter than the brown-eyed kids. And matter of fact, the film is Blue-Eyed, Brown-Eyed. Anyone seen it? Yeah. Okay. So if it wasn't for color, it would be something else. But what we also do with our training, the training is not just a 2.5 day, because the socially constructed division of people in this country based on race didn't happen overnight, so it definitely is not going to be dismantled overnight. I mean, I would say in all of our lifetimes, it won't be dismantled completely. But we at the Institute are in the process of dismantling it on a daily basis. And by doing so, we're engaging all the folks in Winston-Salem who want to come. We even have scholarships. We advise people to come in twos from institutions. We like to have a white person and a person of color to come in twos. And after they do the training and are wowed by it and their eyes are open, and some of the white people are saying, wow, I didn't realize I had all that privilege and I didn't realize this and that. And even people of color, they come in and they say, wow, I didn't know I was doing that, and I was, internalized this racial stuff by the way I act, the way I am, the way my being in the world. They go back and they communicate the information about the training to other people in their institutions. And we have 7 teams now, 7 institutional teams in Winston-Salem. And this is as a result of a critical mass being built within some of these institutions who say, we want to mandate structures that are going to dismantle racism. We want to look at our institutions and look at the policies and procedures that have been in existence to actually uphold racism, because this country was not built on being inclusive. It was built on being exclusive. I mean, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Well, who's the all? Were people of color included that day when they wrote that? I don't think so. Well, as we go on with our training, we built a critical mass, like I said, and we have these 7 teams. And one of the teams is the police department. One of the teams is the health department. One of the teams is, we have several teams that are faith-based. We have the Moravian Church, we have the Methodist Church, and these organizations have made a commitment, and their institutions themselves, the leaderships, have made a commitment through their dollars, giving them a budget. We've been doing strategic plans to look at how racism exists in their policies and procedures, in their systems, how it manifests itself, and how it continues to derive justice. So, social justice within the institutions and their impacts in the community as well. So I could talk a lot more about what we do. One thing I will say is that we're having another training November 20th through the 22nd in Winston-Salem. I have brochures here. Scholarships are available. And I would just also like to say that looking at, someone else had asked the question about what's good about racism. And I know you said, yeah, it's good for the person who holds the cards, who has, all of the piles, the silos over here. Well, I don't see that it's nothing good about it, because what it does is it diminishes human existence, all of our human existence. If you go through life excluding yourself from other people just because of the difference in color, then just how much more could your life have been fuller if you had engaged in a variety and a cornucopia of social, of social differences at the end of your life. I'm in this for the long haul. It's a process. I'm on the road, and it's one of our executive directors who is working very hard to make his institution, his foundation, which has been 99% white for most of its time, but he is working towards changing that, and he's really demonstrated it by being more inclusive in his hiring practices. He said to some of the old heads in the organization who were kind of fighting it, he said, the bus is out there. We have the bus. We're getting on the bus. Either you're going to get on the bus or you're not going to be on the bus, and you're going to be left behind. And that's kind of like where we're trying to get people to be in their mind frame about being inclusive and dismantling racism, to get on the bus. Thank you.